So the Center for Inquiry is suing Walmart over homeopathy. Homeopathy is a particularly bizarre type of alternative medicine, and it was invented by a German doctor in 1796. And to summarize its claims, just so we're all on the same page: 1, if ipecac makes you vomit, you give it to somebody who's already vomiting to stop the vomiting. 2, after, of course, diluting it several times to the point where there's often no ipecac left. And 3, it's okay. We're going to get there. Let me pause it. There we go. So yes, the third being that it's okay because the solvent use of the dilution somehow remembers the ipecac. Now, despite the fact that homeopathy doesn't work and cannot work, it is still being sold in pharmacies and places like Walmart, and often alongside actual medication. And the average person can't always tell the difference. So what CFI wants is for Walmart to properly label the homeopathy it sells by writing, for example, that there's no scientific evidence the product works. One criticism that I've seen in the skeptical community is that this kind of brutal honesty in labeling would effectively kill the market for homeopathy. So there's no way that this could actually happen. This is a sign declaring exactly that there is no good science to back up homeopathy, and it can be found in many, many pharmacies. This is not a mock-up. This is real. Today I want to talk about how we got there and how, as a community, we can actually accomplish things. But for that to happen, I need to take you guys outside of your comfort zone. And I know it's going to be hard, but I'll be holding your hand every step of the way. We're going to another country. Allow me to welcome you to Canada. It's not perpetually snowing. We have seasons. In fact, summers in Montreal can be very hot and humid, little known fact. And it's not that different from the US, really. I mean, we know how to play basketball, we have beer, we live in houses and apartments, we have jobs. Look, it's a very relatable country. And fun fact, Canadian skeptics don't necessarily spend their days debunking the existence of the jackamoose, a cryptid that looks like a jackrabbit one day got really horny for a 1,000-pound bull wearing hipster home decoration on its head. When it comes to skepticism applied to the health sciences and pseudosciences, which is my domain of interest since my background is in molecular biology and cancer research, I'm proud of how public our skeptical presence is. On the French side, we have what is the best television show that I've ever seen that looks at these claims. It's written and hosted by a pharmacist and skeptic, Olivier Bernard, and he's currently prepping his 4th season. He's covered topics like homeopathy, sunscreen, medical cannabis, energy therapies, the microbiome, osteopathy, the keto diet, Lyme disease, and many more. And in 22 minutes, he manages to open with a satirical comedy skit, list the claims made online that he will investigate, experiment on himself, talk to actual experts, and sometimes even to pseudoscientists making the claims, pepper a few animated comedy bits based on the cartoons he draws, report on a literature review, and draw a final conclusion. Some of his work is available in English, and you can find it at thepharmafist.com. But he's not alone. On the English side, we have Timothy Caulfield, who spoke at SciCon last year. He's a health policy expert, a book author, a professor at the University of Alberta, and he hosted a TV show called A User's Guide to Cheating Death, which is, again, another excellent skeptical show looking at detox regimens, the supplement industry, and our relationship with germs. And it's done with a cinematic flair and with a lot of empathy, something I don't see enough of in skeptical circles. And I want to show you the interplay between a lot of these people, because I think that these collaborations, this unofficial network, can be quite powerful. We are facing very affluent lobby groups, and if we don't work together as skeptics, I worry that positive change will always remain out of reach. So I want to talk about the traditional media, about journalists. I often hear complaints by skeptics in the health field that journalists don't understand scientific studies, they don't always present the full context, they propagate hype. And I'm not here to disagree. I mean, look at this. Chocolate is good for you, chocolate is bad for you. Vitamin D is good for you, vitamin D supplements may be overrated. Canola oil is beneficial, canola oil could cause you to be fat and forgetful. This is not good for public science literacy. But not all journalists deserve this kind of criticism. Some of them are doing fantastic work. Many of you will be familiar with Del Bigtree. He's the producer of Vaxxed, the movie Andrew Wakefield directed. It's about how the MMR vaccine totally causes autism, even though we know it doesn't. Bigtree is big on the anti-vax circuit. He's known for wearing a yellow Star of David to show that he's being discriminated against, just like the Jews were during the Holocaust. And he's been talking to parts of the ultra-Orthodox Jewish community in the state of New York about how wonderful measles is and how terrifying the measles vaccine is, while the state was dealing with a measles outbreak. Well, Dell was coming to speak at a major event in Toronto, which you can sort of think of as the New York City of Canada. It was called the Total Health Show, and it featured talks on the harms of genetically modified foods and on holistic treatments for pet wellness. So you know this thing was legit. But you know, people go to these things. They were expecting 15,000 people to go, and they would have been exposed to Bigtree's fear-mongering. But Bigtree was deplatformed. Why? In large part because of a journalist, Carly Weeks, who writes for the Globe and Mail. She found out that he was going to be a speaker there, and she wrote about it. And she questioned the organizers, and she questioned the sponsors for the event. And she made so much noise about this, and she generated so much negative buzz that Del Bigtree's invitation was rescinded. And that's a clear win. This is a skeptical action with a clear result, and it's more powerful than mocking people who believe in this stuff. This is a pro-science worldview, harnessing the power of public outrage to shine a light on a dangerous creature, and it worked. Now, Carly is not the only Canadian journalist doing good work for skepticism. There's Wayne MacPhail and Paul Benedetti. They've been covering chiropractic. Now, when I grew up, I was under the impression that chiropractors were just medical doctors with specialized in back care. I mean, they called themselves doctors, they took x-rays, my family went to them when they had issues. I didn't know that chiropractic was invented by a guy who claimed to channel God's energy into the body of a deaf janitor to restore his hearing. Now, chiropractic is splintering into two groups. You've got the straights, who are originalists, and you've got those that are trying to be evidence-based. And it's the straights that are in charge of things in Ontario. So MacPhail and Benedetti have been writing about this. And I am quoted in one of their articles, and as is Tim Caulfield and Joe Schwartz and Ryan Armstrong from Bad Science Watch. And hopefully someone somewhere in Canada read those articles and learned something they didn't know about chiropractic. Some journalists, they get it. They're pro-science, they're on top of things. Others need some coaching. I saw a video by the CBC about mega doses of vitamin C being administered to cancer patients. The claim was that they made the side effects from chemotherapy more tolerable. And unfortunately, there's no good evidence of that so far, which is why our public healthcare system in Quebec does not cover these injections. But you can get them in Ontario at an integrative oncology clinic, which marries actual medicine with naturopathy. And the report I saw on this was quite gullible and was guilty of false balance. Now, I could have denounced it on Twitter. I would have gained a few more followers. I would have energized my base. I would have appeared so much smarter than this journalist. But I didn't. I did something off the beaten path. I reached out to the journalist privately, and I calmly explained to her what she had gotten wrong in her video. And I realized that she didn't understand how basic research leads to clinical trials, leads to drug approval. So we talked about this for quite a bit, and while her initial report was not taken down, she wrote a new piece informing people about how biomedical research works. She even commissioned this infographic to accompany the article, and she quoted me throughout. And she referred to me as a man of science. So there's that. Our first impulse is often to blame and to mock and to dismiss, but sometimes it really pays off to educate. That was traditional media, but there's also social media. Social media has played a role in propagating misinformation like anti-vaccination tropes, but it can also be a force for good. It's a tool, and just like a hammer can be used to threaten someone, it can also be used to help build a house. There's a college in Ontario called Georgian College. One of its students wrote to some of us Canadian skeptics, showing us that they were offering a 3-year diploma program in homeopathy. She thought it was ridiculous and something needed to be done. Timothy Caulfield was one of the people she contacted. This guy does interview after interview after interview with the media. In fact, we flew him in for an event recently, and I accompanied him to a TV interview, and in the cab, he was on the phone doing a different interview. He understands how powerful being quoted in the media can be to sway public opinion, but he also understands the reach of social media. He has close to 50,000 followers on Twitter. So when he tweeted about Georgian College offering a diploma in homeopathy, that tweet had legs. The media swooped in, and Georgian College had a PR problem, so they canceled their diploma in homeopathy. Sunlight can be a powerful disinfectant. It doesn't always work, and there are ideas that can't be fought simply by exposing them. But institutions don't like having a PR problem. And using social media platforms and working with journalists can create PR problems that beg for a science-based solution. A way in which I got to play with the power of social media was with a video that I made that blew way, way past my expectations. As anyone who publicly addresses pseudoscience knows, your friends start to send you stuff, either for you to mock or for you to pronounce a verdict on. Is this true? It doesn't look legit, but maybe there's something to it. So I got sent a video that was making the rounds on Facebook one day, and it was about radio waves being generated by this machine, and it could cure cancer, and Big Pharma didn't want you to know, blah, 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 blah. And I had seen plenty of videos like that in the past, and of course, they always did better than my videos because they preyed on vulnerable people, and they claimed there was an all-natural solution to a complicated problem that they haven't heard of before because they've been brainwashed by the medical establishment. So on that day, I decided to fight back. It wasn't so much fighting back as wanting to have fun with the concept and expose how easy it is to manipulate people with images and text and catchy music. So I put together a fake cancer cure video, 2 minutes long, that had a few tip-offs that there was something wrong if you were paying close attention, and that quickly revealed that this was just a manipulative fake, and the message was, be skeptical online. I showed it back-to-back with the real one in front of my colleagues, and I'll always remember that one of them got up to leave at the beginning of my video, saying that she had seen it recently and she knew how it went. So I knew that it was convincing. We approached many people to spread it on social media. One of them was the host of HQ Trivia. They posted it natively on their accounts, and it just spread and spread and spread. And we kept tabs on all the individual versions of that video. I was going to a conference in New York, and when I landed, my inbox was filling up with interview requests from journalists. I had to leave the conference and go to a remote studio in Manhattan to do TV interviews back home. We ended up getting 14 million views. Now, that video will not solve the problem of media illiteracy online, but I'd like to think of it as a booster shot. And it led to close to 50 interviews in total on seemingly every CBC radio affiliate, in major newspapers, TV stations both in Canada and the US, the BBC, even an Australian morning show. And that helped spread the message of skepticism even more. I'm lucky that I get to work with journalists a lot. Not only do I have university degrees, I work for a university, which automatically grants me an aura of legitimacy in the eyes of journalists. And I recognize that many skeptics don't have this benefit, but I would encourage you to try nonetheless, especially if you belong to or create your own skeptical group. You can pitch ideas to journalists. You can offer your take on stories. You can privately message a journalist that got something wrong and politely and with the right evidence give them better information and offer to help them out in the future if they want. I'm a science communicator working at the McGill Office for Science and Society, a 20-year-old office started by 3 chemistry professors, the mandate of which is to separate sense from nonsense for the public. I'm essentially a full-time skeptic employed by a university, and I'm not a professor. And if a similarly backed office exists elsewhere in the world, we're not aware. And that's another win for Canadian skepticism. We have an office like this that is recognized by the media and the public as a reliable source of information on matters of health, chemistry, medicine, and other scientific topics. And for years, nay, decades, its director, Professor Joe Schwartz, who spoke earlier today, has been very vocal about the nonsensical nature of homeopathy. And he's a chemist, and so this particular type of pseudochemistry has a way of riling him up. And yet, homeopathy was still approved for sale by Health Canada and still available for purchase in pharmacies with no clear warning that these pills were just sugar pills. Well, that's not entirely true. There was a warning. You see, in 2015, CBC's consumer-focused investigative journalism TV show Marketplace aired a fantastic episode/sting operation entitled A License to Deceive. In it, they created a fake homeopathic remedy for fever and pain in children. They called it Nidon, which we find out at the end is an anagram of nothing. And they submitted an application to Health Canada to be able to sell it. The proof of efficacy: photocopies of an old book reporting on traditional use. And that was enough. And Health Canada approved the product. Again, PR nightmare for Health Canada. So they decided that any homeopathic product for symptomatic relief of cough, cold, and flu for children 12 and under would need to have a warning printed on the packaging saying, "This claim is based on traditional homeopathic references and not modern scientific evidence." Make sure to bring your magnifying glass next time you shop at your local drugstore if you don't want to miss the warning. So there was that, but nothing else. Here's a tip. If you're looking for media coverage of something that is ongoing, but that doesn't look like news, get new data. There's a reason why the news is called the news. They want to report on new information. So homeopathy was a problem. We wanted to bring attention to it, but it's not news unless there's something new about it. So I decided to do a little investigation, also because I was curious to know the answer. I wanted to know how many pharmacies in Montreal carried homeopathy. Flu season was beginning, and so I decided to focus on a particularly egregious homeopathic product, oscillococcinum, which is duck, heart, and liver diluted 1 in 100, 200 times in a row. Spoiler alert, there's none left at the end. I focused on the 5 big pharmacy chains in Quebec, found all of the pharmacies in Montreal, divided up the city into 3 geographical sections to make sure we had representative coverage, randomly sampled 10 stores for each pharmacy chain and each geographical section, and called them up. In total, 150 pharmacies. And what I learned was that at least 2/3 of them carried the product. I wrote this up as an article for our website, and this got some play with journalists. One of them, Philippe Mercure, from one of the best French-language newspapers in the province, he decided to take this further. He wanted to know if pharmacists themselves would endorse the product. So he put on his shoes and he went to 20 different pharmacies in Montreal, and he reported that 1/3 recommended not buying the product for his flu-afflicted girlfriend, 1/3 wasn't sure but thought it could work, and 1/3 of them recommended the product. Those are pharmacists. They went to school, they learned about science, and most of them thought homeopathy could work. That's a problem. That was on the front page of that newspaper that day. It came out during Pharmacy Awareness Week in Quebec. So, bit of a PR problem there. Philip had asked for quotes from numerous cogs in that system that allowed homeopathy to be sold in pharmacies, and that was key. A journalist questioning all of these moving parts, because one of them turned out to have some give. The Quebec Order of Pharmacists stated that they were surprised and disappointed by the findings. They declared that there was no scientific evidence demonstrating the efficacy of homeopathy for any indication. They emailed all of their members and reminded them of that, and that any pharmacist caught recommending these products would find themselves in a precarious position vis-à-vis professional ethics. He also eventually got the Physicians College in Quebec to publicly state that homeopathy does not work. But it was the ABCPQ that really changed things. They are an association of pharmacy chains in Quebec, and their representative announced to the journalist that they would send out signs to pharmacies so that the public would know that there's no science behind these products. A few months later, I get a text message from a friend of mine. He was at his local drugstore. He saw something, sent me a screenshot. Sure enough, there it was, the promised sign. The ABCPQ had printed out 6,000 of them and sent them to pharmacies all over the province. Now, they are optional, so they're not everywhere, but they are hard to ignore, and they led to another wave of media coverage. And recently, the pharmacy that I go to, which had not put up the sign, they had this sign, which was a redesign and second printing by the ABCPQ. So I was worried that these initial signs might not last very long, but there seems to be goodwill at play. And hopefully our local public is a little bit more informed about the nonsense that is homeopathy. Now, I don't have time to go over every success story coming out of Canada. There was the Bad Science Watch campaign against homeopathic vaccines that resulted in labeling change. There was me tipping off a journalist about predatory stem cell seminars, which led to some good local coverage. There's the fact that most of us at the OSS visit the set of a local TV station fairly regularly to talk about science and pseudoscience, because some people still get their news from the television. We need more of that, and not just in Canada. The project manager for the Good Thinking Society in the UK once told me that, in a geopolitical metaphor, he thinks of scientists as the explorers who push back the boundaries of the world, and as skeptics as the home guard, defending established scientific territory from invasion. We need more people in the skeptical community making the transition from passive consumers to active participants if we want to change things. And you don't need to be an academic to make a significant contribution. Case in point, the body of evidence. I've been co-hosting the science-based medical podcast with Dr. Christopher Labos for close to 5 years now, and our show involves a number of collaborators. We've worked with many stand-up comedians for our Vox Pop segment at the beginning. That's when someone goes to a public location and they ask people, what have you heard about this topic? Do you think it's true? Have you tried it? And having a comedian there means that we can bring some levity to the show and get our listeners to relax a bit and get less defensive in case we're about to show that there's no good evidence behind their sacred cow. We also have singers/musicians/ one-person bands who turn our take-home messages into jingles like this one. We had a webmaster who created and maintained one of our first websites, and we recently hired a local illustrator to draw cartoons about bad science. These people can't necessarily analyze a scientific paper and blog about it, but they can help us do our job. They have talents that Chris and I don't have. So if you likewise have talents that could be used by the skeptical community, let the community know. And finally, I do have to bring this back to an important talk given on a similar stage by Phil Plait and entitled Don't Be a Dick, by saying, don't be a dick. Seriously, it doesn't work. 9 years have passed since he gave his impassioned speech to the skeptical community, and I have to say, I haven't exactly seen a sea change in behavior. You may think that this is tone policing, but it's not. Our behavior has a direct impact on how persuasive we are, because facts aren't enough. I was talking about institutions having PR problems and needing to resolve them. We also have a PR problem. We are frequently perceived as being arrogant and close-minded and being the kinds of people who go, well, actually, and that translates into not being as effective as we could be with our scientific facts. We ask non-skeptics to use their prefrontal cortex to block their emotional responses and their wishful thinking, to be more rational. But we also need to use our prefrontal cortex to stop us from lashing out at ignorant people online, especially those with 14 followers, because it often makes things worse. I'd invite all of us to take a page from the book of mental health professionals who deal with patients, and to act less like know-it-alls and self-righteous warriors, and more like therapists. Because a therapist who tells her patient, why don't you divorce your stupid wife, Frank? That'll be $150, please. Our time's up. That doesn't work. We need to go beyond facts on the divisive scientific issues of our time. And we need to start talking about values. This is something that I wasn't trained to do as a scientist. I learned to present the context of my work, my hypothesis, my study design, my results, my interpretation of them, and future avenues of research. But we now know that we can hardly sway the vaccine hesitant with facts alone. We need to remind them that we are parents as well, and we want to protect our children from harm, which is why we vaccinate. We need to remind the GMO hesitant that just like them, we want food that is nutritious and affordable and tasty and safe. We need to reduce polarization by showing our similarities before jumping into the arena. If facts don't care about your feelings, feelings don't care about your facts either. Buffy the Vampire Slayer, season 7. Up until then, there had only been a single Slayer in existence. It was only when she died that the next potential Slayer was trained and became the Slayer. Well, in season 7, they realized that this was a rule that could be broken, and they broke it. That they empowered all of the potential Slayers all over the world to help them fight back the coming apocalypse. There are a lot of skeptical stars here in Vegas this weekend, but skepticism is not just for stars. It's for everyone. Reach out to journalists. Create good content. Educate people online without being dicks. Be therapists for skepticism. Thank you.
Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and ring that bell to be notified about new videos. You can follow us on social media, and if you really love what we do, consider supporting us with a donation. Links to all that good stuff is in the description below.